Hello, everyone. Today we're going to try to replicate the steps that we attempted in class yesterday, although my computer apparently was malfunctioning. Everything that we went over does work, but for some reason it was just crashing my machine. So today I'm on a separate computer, and hopefully we will be able to resolve these problems without any hitches so that you can produce them exactly. So I will see you in a moment. Okay, here we are in the third person template and in the root content directory. What I would like to do right now is start by making a new folder, and I'm going to call this imported audio, a space, imported audio assets, because I already made some sound effects in Pro Tools for a door opening and closing. Also, I decided in advance that the transit time for the door was going to be 3.5 seconds, and therefore I edited those sounds in Pro Tools so that they would also be 3.5 seconds for synchronization purposes. So we'll open up that folder, and now I'm just going to use a content browser, a file browser on my computer to locate those bounced files. I remember that I made them on my T7 drive, and they live inside of a folder called Pro Tools Sessions. And this is the one that I made this morning, Door Sounds and More. So I'll open that up, and I've already bounced them. So they're going to be inside this bounced files folder, and there are two, okay? And these are mono, not stereo sound files. And I'm going to send you the Pro Tools session that contains all of the source material that I used unaltered on the first several tracks. Everything is color-coded so that it should be pretty obvious to you which groups of tracks represent what. So I've got my source material all shaded one color. All of the sounds that I used for the door opening were just derived from the source material, and the same thing is true for the door closing sound. When you look at the Pro Tools session, I think you'll be able to make out what I've done. In any case, this is the finished product, and I'm just going to take both of them and drag and drop them into this folder that I have prepared. And these are just simple WAV files that I can highlight, and I can Control-S or Command-S and save. They're not exactly the same volume subjectively, but we can correct for that later. I've got something for a door opening, and then also something for the door closing. Okay, so they're not perfect, but they will suffice for today's exercise. What we want to do is we want to create a regular swinging door that will open when our player gets close enough to it automatically, and then close behind the player after the player has passed through. This is also going to be repeatable, and only the player is going to be able to open and close that door using the game mechanic that we're going to be exploring today and attaching that sound to. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to right-click in my content browser, make a new folder, and I'm going to call this Doors. And maybe there will be different kinds of doors in my level, so maybe I'll make another folder called door_01, which is fine. And inside of there is where I'm going to be creating the blueprint class. So in this empty area, I'm going to right-click, choose Blueprint class, and this only needs to be of type actor. So we will do that, and we're going to rename this while we have the opportunity, BP_door_01. And again, I'm just doing that in anticipation of perhaps needing more than one kind of door, but this will be the first example, so I can hit enter there. Now I'm going to double click on the blueprint to open up the editor, and I'll use this tab here to dock it at the top of the screen. We are now looking at the viewport, and all we see is the default scene root. So I'm going to select that and add a few more components here. The first thing I'm going to add is a static mesh. So we'll click the Add button, and you'll see, you can search for it, but that's one of the most common things to add. So it should be sitting there in the list right for your selection, static mesh. And I'm going to rename this door mesh. And that's fine, but naming it does not actually turn it into that mesh. So while I've got that component selected, I'm going to go into the static mesh field in the details panel and find the door that comes with starter content. And I can do that easily by searching for it, door, and the door is right there. Okay, so here is our door, beg your pardon. And I think I'd also like to include the door frame in this blueprint. When you add the door frame, it's wise if you select the default scene root before adding yet another static mesh. If I were to have the door mesh still selected and then add another static mesh, it would then be a child of the door mesh, and therefore if the door mesh has kinematics of any kind, that means that the door frame is going to go along for the ride. Now, we don't want that to happen. We want them to be siblings and not have one be the parent of the other. So again, I'm going to choose default scene root, and I'm going to add another static mesh, and this is going to be called door frame, like so. And with that highlighted, I'm going to search for it here, frame, and we can see static mesh door frame right there, and bringing it into our level. All right. So what we can do at this point is we can select our door mesh, and we can try to get it so that it's like right in the middle of the door frame. But as you can see, this is a little bit challenging based on our snapping scale. So I'm going to change the snapping value. Instead of 10 units, I'll set it to 5 units, and maybe this will allow me to get that centered better. I want to look at this from other angles and make sure that it looks good. I want the door inset about halfway through the door frame and accessible from both sides. Okay, so that's looking pretty good, and we can compile and save. Next, I'm going to go to the event graph. Excuse me, that was premature. I beg your pardon, because there's one more thing that I want to add. We're going to be doing a collision-based event, and therefore I'm going to need something to trigger that collision. So for that, I'm going to use a box collision. And I don't want the box collision to be a child of either static mesh. I want it to be a child of the default scene root. So I will click Add and simply type box and find box collision. All right, and we don't have to call it anything else necessarily, but we do want to scale this around the door and give plenty of leeway for our character to have to overlap that volume in order to be able to cause that door to open. Sometimes I make this a little bit overkill, but we can always come back inside the blueprint and adjust the scale of the collision volume. Okay, great. Now we can head over to the event graph and marquee highlight over these courtesy nodes and just delete them. We won't need them anymore. So here we've got the components that we need, and we're going to start with the box component and use a collision-based event associated with the box, which is called Add on Component Begin Overlap. Now, there are two ways we can do this. If I've got the box component highlighted and scroll down all of the way on the details panel, you can see the different events that I can associate with that box. But I find it easier just to right-click on the component, that is a right-click, choosing Add Event and Add On Component Begin Overlap, okay? So the other actor is, I only want the third-person character for now to be able to open up that door. So I'm going to cast it to the third-person character. So from other actor, we will pull out and type cast to BP underscore, oops, got to spell everything right, cast to BP underscore, and you'll see it soon. It's this one, the BP third person character. And just in case I want to do anything more complex later on, as long as I've got a reference to it, I do like to right click and promote that to a variable and allow the setter to store it. Okay, so we've set that variable and it now lives as a variable inside this blueprint. Okay. So once we have done that, now what we need to do is we need to specify a duration over which the door is going to open. So I'm going to create a timeline. You can do that just by simply typing timeline until you find it. Add timeline is the one that we want. And you can rename this if you wish, door transition time. Like so. And ultimately what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to take this door mesh and set its relative rotation. So I'm going to get our mise en place in place. That was a little redundant, but I'm going to type set relative rotation, not location. And I want to make sure that I choose the right one, okay? This is going to be for the door mesh and not for any of these other components. That would have been easier had I pulled right off the door mesh. Let me even show you that. I can pull off of there and type set relative rotation. And now there's no guesswork, okay? It's already using the door mesh as the target. Now the door's rotation is a structure or a struct, and it has an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis. We will only need access to the z-axis. And each one of these members of this vector, basically, are unto themselves just float values. So I can right-click on this pin and choose Split Struct Pin. And now I've got access to all three axes of that vector, and each one of them unto themselves are just float values. Okay, so that's worth keeping in mind. Okay, we're going to set that rotation based on a float value. So inside of our door transition time, we can get inside of the timeline by double-clicking it, double-click. And right now it's empty, but I'm going to add a new track by clicking this track button and choosing the first option, Add Float Track. I've already decided in advance that I want to make this door open and close over 3.5 seconds. So here where it says length, if I click there, you can see that it's partially highlighted. But that is not really highlighted. You really want to double click it again until it's a brighter version of that color to know that you definitely have that highlighted. And I'm going to type 3.5, and that will specify the duration of this timeline. Okay, next, near the leading edge of the timeline, I'm going to right click and add what's called a keyframe. And I'll have two entry fields that I can edit right now. First, the time. I want to round that off to exactly 0 and leave the value at 0. And then I'm going to repeat this process at the right side, add key. And this one, I want it to be at the end of the timeline. So I'm going to specify a time of 3.5 and a value of 1. Now, I will tell you, if you wanted to, you could set this value higher than 1. For example, if I wanted the door to open up by 120 degrees, I could have typed just directly 120 here. But I don't like to do it that way. I like to do it with a lerp, as we're going to see in just a little while. Okay, so this is going to have a value from 0 to 1. In order to see this better, let me just first of all enter that value. We can use these two buttons right here, zoom to fit horizontal and zoom to fit vertical. And if I click both of them, I can see my entire curve. Now that's a perfectly linear transition, and sometimes you can get more natural movement if you make it almost more like a cosine type of curve. So I'm going to left-click the first keyframe and also left-click, I beg your pardon, the other keyframe. Now I'm doing that, let me just show you that one more time because I'm doing it while holding Shift, and I forgot to mention that. So hold Shift, left-click until that changes colors, and then Shift left-click again. At this point, you'll notice that both keyframes are highlighted, and if I right-click either one, I can then just choose this Auto button, and I get this nice ease-in, ease-out shape. You can control the tangents as well, but I don't recommend that at this time because you could end up overshooting or undershooting. So just leave them as they are, and that will be fine. Now, you can close the timeline, but be careful that you just don't close the blueprint. I'm just closing the timeline because I've already done inside of it the things that I need to do. Okay, now what is going to come out of the return value here is going to be that stream of floats over 3.5 seconds that go from 0 to 1. And I want my door to go from 0, its original position, to 120 degrees when it's fully open. And there's lots of ways that you can do this, but the way that we did in class was using what's called a lerp, or linear interpolate node, L-E-R-P. Just type lerp, and make sure that you're using the one under float, okay? Because this is a float value, okay? And let me show you again. This is a float value. So we're going to lerp this. Excuse me, I don't want to pull off that pin yet. I'm going to right-click and just type lerp. And a lerp is just something that is going to smoothly transition between an A value and a B value, depending on the alpha. And the alpha can go from 0 to 1, which is why I limited my range in the door transition time. The alpha of a lerp does not recognize anything above 1, nor does it go into the negatives below 0. So it's going to be this gradual timeline over 3.5 seconds that starts at 0. So we're going to be all the way at the A value. And by the time it reaches 1 at the end of the timeline, then it's going to reach the value for B, which I'm going to simply hard code as 120. And that's going to be 120 rotational units here. Okay, so now the return value can get plugged into new rotation Z, like that, okay? And let me just make sure I haven't overlooked anything. I've got my collision volume. I've got my begin overlap. I've got my variable stored. Sometimes I like to say play from start for this rather than play. And I forgot one thing. I forgot to take the update execution pin and connect it to the setter, okay? Otherwise, the door will not move. So this is the complete first part of the script right here. We'll compile and save. There should be no errors, and go back to our map. Now I can take the entire blueprint actor and place it into the level. Let's just raise that up and hit end, snap it to the ground. And I want to see what direction that's facing. That should be fine, and my player start is right here. So let's see if it works. I'm going to walk up to the door, or in my case, run up to the door, and it will open. It's not going to close behind me yet, But I want to show you another problem first. I recall that this door did not come in with collision. And this door mesh that I'm using is inside of the starter content props directory. I'll drag one instance of that same door into my level and show you something in play. I should not be able to do that. I should not be able to just walk right through that door. And even when it's in the blueprint, I can walk right through it, and that's not very helpful to me if it's supposed to be a door. So let's click Escape, and I'm going to delete this static mesh from my world and use what's called the Unreal Engine Static Mesh Editor. Since this is the static mesh that we're using in the blueprint, I simply have to add some collision to it. And we can do that by double-clicking it. And now we are inside of the static mesh editor. All we have to do is go to this collision menu and add a box simplified collision. And there it is. Now this is going to block us from walking through the door, and I can save it that way. And if I go back into play, I'm going to run quickly into that door, but it should stop me, okay, until it's fully open. All right, by the time it's open, of course, I can walk through. And, but, you know, the door mesh itself is now you can't walk through that mesh. You can see it's pushing me out of the way. And that's because of the collision hull we just put around it. Okay, so what if we want the door to automatically close behind us? And this is the exact same procedure that we used in class yesterday, although my computer was definitely doing something weird, and I've decided not to use that particular laptop anymore because it malfunctions in too many ways. So let's make another event based on this box. It too will be collision based. So we'll right click, add event, but this time not on begin overlap, but on end overlap. Okay. And we do not have to cast again because we stored the third person character reference inside of a variable that we have inside of our blueprint. So instead of casting one more time, that would be redundant, I can pull off of here and use what's called an equal Boolean. We can get that by clicking the equal sign 2 times, equal, equal, and there we'll have that equal Boolean operator. Now, what I want to make sure is that the other actor is equal to the stored reference to the BP third-person actor. Now, by the way, when you pull this into your graph, you're going to be able to get it or set it. In this case, we want to get it, right? Because we've already stored it here. We have a copy of it. And if the other actor is equivalent to this reference, that will allow the rest of the logic to proceed. Now, the equal operator returns a Boolean value, and most of the time when we have a return value that's a Boolean, that's a way of creating conditional flow control within our scripts. So the most common of which is called a branch node, and I can right-click and search for branch, and I will find it under flow control. But it's something that we need so often that there's a shortcut for it as well. I can hold down letter B and left-click, and now I have a branch, and it has a Boolean condition pin. So if these are the same, then I can simply plug this into the condition, and that will be true. So this will produce an execution pulse out of the true pin because I've just made them the same. I'll not forget this time to connect my execution wire. And at this point, we can take the true pin and connect it to the reverse of the timeline. And let's just compile and save. And let's change that, to reverse from end rather than from reverse. I'd like to get all the way open and all the way closed. This is not different at all from the scripting we did in class yesterday. So have faith that that was the correct script to use. And I know that some of you said it was working for you, and some of you said that it wasn't, and it definitely wasn't working for me. I have no explanation as to why. This is some of the most simple scripting that we can do. So I can walk up to the door, and it's going to open over 3.5 seconds. And if I walk through, it's going to close behind me. And I can do that from either direction as long as I don't get in the door's way, like so. Okay, now let's add our audio. So we're going to go back to our content directory, and you might recall that I made this folder here called Imported Audio Assets, and there are 2 WAV files in there, and I want to make both of them into separate sound cues. So we'll take our door open, we'll right-click it, and we're going to create cue. And we don't really have to do much to that. I'll use the default name, open it up, make sure that everything looks good. We don't want the wave player to be looping. It's just going to be what's called a one-shot. And frankly, this is all we need at the moment, okay? We can, of course, take the final output and we can adjust the volume and pitch multiplier if we need to. As I recall, one of these ended up subjectively sounding louder than the other, but we can balance that out later. So we're going to we are going to save that sound cue, and now we're going to make another sound cue out of the door close. Right-click that, create cue. I don't need to rename that. Door close cue makes plenty of sense to me. And if I click on the final output, likewise, I can adjust the volume multiplier, so we'll save. We can now incorporate these sounds into the door script for the blueprint. So I think what I would like to do is to trigger those sounds to play right before the door starts opening. So between this setter and this play from start, if I want to, I can choose play sound at location. Play sound at location, and that will allow this to be spatialized. Play sound at location. What's going on here? Hold on. Play sound at location. There it is. I don't know why I didn't get it before. And make sure that this is in your execution path, okay? Now it's going to want to know which asset to play. We'll populate that in just a moment, and it's also going to want to know where in the world to play it. Now, I want this to be at the location of the door. So we can take our variable or get this information from this output return value, but I can simply get the actor's location, get actor location. And be careful, because when you type that, it usually has the wrong one selected. So you want to make sure that you're using this one and not that one. It's under transformation, get actor location, and that can be plugged right into the location pin just like that. Now I need my sound asset, and I've got it door open cue. I can simply highlight that, go back into my blueprint, and use the Use Selected Asset from Content Browser button and pop it in there. So let's test this so far. I hope you can hear that. I hope that's loud enough. So I have a little doorknob sound at the front and some squeaks. And now we just need to do something similar for the end. I'm going to preempt this by highlighting my door close cue and going back into the door blueprint. And I wonder where we could do this. Again, right before we get the reverse from end. So I'll do another play sound at location, like so. And it's going to be the exact same deal, okay? I want to, we already have the location, okay? So we don't have to get that again. I can double dip on that because the location of the door has not changed. I can use the same for both. And I want to make sure that this is in my execution path before it gets to reverse from end. And this, while I'm thinking of it, I'll play from start. Okay. And I still have that sound cue highlighted. So once again, I can just pop that in there, compile and save. And now we should have a door that has the ability to open and close behind us as many times as we like from either side, and has sound to accompany it. I'll pass through. I suppose I could have made that little latching sound a little bit more dramatic. Yes, I probably should have. But I will send you all that stuff in the Pro Tools session that I'll zip up and send along with this. So thank you once again for being with me today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Okay, have fun practicing. Bye-bye.